40981. And we are also streaming live on YouTube, yes, at Smooth 981 FM Lagos. Of course, this morning, my analyst joining me to take a look at the stories I have with me, Mr. C and Chibuzor. Very good morning to you, gentlemen.
Good morning, Lagos.
Good morning, Naya. Good morning, Chibuzor. Good morning, Lagos. Down to Salah.
Mr. C, I don't know why you had to add that countdown to Salah. Why do I feel personally attacked? I don't know why, but I do.
We're expecting to celebrate with the Muslim movement, and we're trusting that each and every one of them will be needful.
I don't know what the needful is, but we move ahead. John, let's begin in this day newspaper, Mr. C, where the Central Bank of Nigeria, the CBN, has made the digital ID and social media handles of bank customers a mandatory requirement for the Know Your Customer KYC policy in the financial industry going forward. What are your thoughts on this?
Okay, so thank you. So let's down back a bit and let's take it from the beginning, right? It has become increasingly incumbent upon the central bank and by extension the various deposit money banks in the country and other financial institutions to actually know their customers. Why is this necessary? This is necessary because we're trying to fight money laundering, we're trying to fight bribery, we're trying to fight corruption and every other form of criminal activity. Now, how have banks previously done this? They've done this by collecting government-issued identification documents. They've also done this by getting references, and they've also done this by monitoring transactions related to property acquisitions and the like. Now, what has stirred the hornet's nest is this new requirement for social media handles. Now, to be honest, this does not appear to have been well thought, and I'm going to explain why. We've had this long-running issue with identification to the extent that the national identity card was then made law, and you had to have your mobile number tied to your national identity number. You had to have your bank account tied to your national identity number. Yeah. And let's not forget, even with those two, we had other forms of identification attached to bank accounts. Now, why has it suddenly become necessary for the central bank to insist on social media handles? Like I said earlier, it doesn't make a lot of sense. One, not every Nigerian is on social media, and that is something they need to live with. That is something they need to understand. Two, this appears to be an implied admission that government-issued identification documents have failed and do not accurately establish the identity of the persons who hold or possess those documents.
Exactly, but additionally, the CBN have said that this additional information that financial institutions can actually gain valuable insights into customers' online presence, their activities, enabling better assessment of potential risks that are associated with money laundering, terrorism financing, and so on and so forth.
So you have a social media handle type strategy. What are you going to learn from such a thing? Now, and this is a big point for me, it appears to flout the constitutional provision. There is a constitutional provision that guarantees every single Nigerian the freedom to associate with whoever he or she likes. Now, by seeking to compulsorily compel Nigerians to get social media handles, you are in fact saying, we want you to associate with Nigerians, other people on social media, whether or not you want to associate with them. That does not make any sense. And if challenged, I expect this directive to be struck down. You cannot breach a constitutional, fundamentally protected right. In addition to that, where is NIMC in all of this? If we have a national identity number, if each Nigerian has a national identity number, Are they saying, as is the central bank suggesting, that a social media handle will provide more information as to an individual over and above that of the NIN? What is the social media handle tagged to? Is it tagged to your bank account? No. Is it tagged to your telephone number? No. So if you don't post anything with your social media handle and they force you to attach it to your bank account, what they're seeking to find, will they find it? Now, the national identity number is crucial because it is linked to other aspects, other facets of an individual's life, and it becomes increasingly harder to hide criminal activity if you're using an NIN linked account. So that is the problem we have. The CBN should have thought this over. This does not make any sense. And it begs the question with the legal department at the CBN, look at this proposal, look at these regulations before they're issued.
Okay.
All right, Chibuzor, do you want to weigh in on this?
I like to chip in heavily. So when I saw this come out last week, I was extremely worried. Why to start with is that, like Mr. C pointed out, your social media handles are it's not compulsory. It's a choice for the individual to actually have a social media handle to start with. So, and there's no structure to that data. So when the CBN now comes out to reinforce it and says, oh, it gives the banks the ability to do background checks, what then are the service charges that the banks are taking from the customers to do? That's part of normal banking. That's the banking job. It's not for me as a customer to make it easier. If you ask for particular documentation, I'll provide it for you. One good thing is that SERAP is already on this case. I know that SERAP has already sent out something, and they said they've actually asked them that they either have to send something out to the CBN last week, and I've asked that they actually have to repeal this, or they'll be taking them to court based on this, because obviously there are several things, like Mr. C has pointed out, that have to do with fundamental human rights of the Nigerian. Not everyone is on social media. We're even talking about a small percentage of Nigerians that are unbanked. I think we should face what the major problems are, which is even getting the unbanked into some form of structure we can actually track and monitor them. There are organizations who are there to do credit vetting. There are organizations who are there to do background checks. Let's empower these organizations to do the work that they need to do. In fact, there are a lot of things around these issues, even data protection, data security. Is this minimum data? Because for everything you're supposed to collect, bodies are supposed to collect minimum data to be able to perform whatever task they need to perform. Does this exceed that mandate? I'm sorry. I'm going to stand on the side of people that will be more suspicious of why they want to collect this data, and I do not think it has to do much with banking, to be truthful.
Okay, so to jump on that, right? It appears also, and it is possible, given the large trust deficit between the government and the people in government, that if the government through the CBN is seeking to link bank accounts to social media handles, are they looking for ways of identifying critics on social media with a view to clamping down on them?
Some people have actually raised that as a possibility, but of course, would they even need the CBN to do that if that is the case?
No, because before now, for them to clamp down on you, they have to use the legal means to monitor you. But now this would seem all legal, because once you have a bank account linked to a social media handle, if the social media handle puts out information which it considers critical or adverse to its position, it can then get an order from a court freezing the account. So if they want to silence critics, they shut down their accounts. They have no access to funds. And then what happens? The critics are then compelled to back down. There must be freedom of information in this critical time. Not everyone supports the government. Not everyone will be supportive of every single act or decision taken by the government. And there must be room for people to offer constructive criticism of government policies, government actions. And where the government fails to act within the confines of the law or breaches the provisions of the law, people must be free to raise their objections to such breaches and request that those breaches be remedied.
All right, let's go to WhatsApp really quickly. Nigerians have some things to say here. All right, Joseph says, good morning, freshly pressed. The CBN should better step down this non-essential law. Is it not the same banks that can't handle the existing information with them, let alone of our deposits, that funny activities happen to them, and the banks tell you no trace of how the money disappears from your account? How can they handle new requests if they won't use it for unimaginable things? May God bless Nigeria. That's Joseph sending in that message. Tinu says, hogwash shows such a needless requirement. How do you even validate the handles? All the databases are not, all the existing databases are not even linked. Abbas said, we like to always condemn every policy or release from government or its agencies. Did the CBN tell people that they would be sanctioned based on their political leanings? It is regarded good if it happens in other supposedly saner climes, but we cry foul all the time.
It doesn't happen in saner climes. It does not happen in saner climes.
Thank you, Chibuzor. I think people need to learn to be objective. This does not happen in serious and properly run countries.
He further says,
need to learn to be citizens. That's the first problem. I think some people just follow this train track, and wherever it takes them to, they keep following until 4 years or 8 years after that they complain.
He further says, the banks will not force you to open one if you don't have. After all, not all bank customers have email addresses, and that didn't stop them from holding bank accounts. All right, let's move on quickly to our next story here. Chibuzor, I'm coming to you with this one. Now, the head of the African Development Bank, Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, said he is impressed with the bold and sound policies of President Bola Tinubu for Nigeria's economy.
Okay. Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, in his official role as the head of the ADB, and also obviously in his personal role as a Nigerian, a proud Nigerian, has come out to say that he's in support of the president's bold economic plans for the country. A lot of talk. This was at the recently concluded summit, in Paris, France. And obviously, he's come out to say that the FDB will strongly support Nigeria's vision it's the government's vision for the economy. Well, that's all good, and it's one good thing that he's impressed, given his status and his office and his experience and knowledge. So, for some of us who have not had a very clear view into what those economic plans would be, it gives us some level of assurance or reassurance. At least some people who follow Dr. Akinwumi and will believe what he says and take him seriously when he speaks. Yeah, but that's one part of it. It's one part to have the plans. The other part is to have the plans on ground and make a difference. What I've told a lot of Nigerians is that the truth is that we're in a very interesting position as a country, and the proof of the pudding will be in the eating. Nigeria we've never been short of having interesting economic plans. I would say, apart from maybe the last 8 years, where there was no, as far as I was concerned, there was no clarity in what plan we were putting forward. We just appeared to be going from place to place. But typically, Nigeria is good with documentation. We're good with putting out those plans. It's getting those plans consistently implemented and getting things on the ground. And yes, guess what? Whatever our political leanings are, or whatever we believe about the government or whoever is, or the president in power, whoever government is in power, the truth is that Nigeria is in very interesting political times, more interesting economic times. We've driven our economy on a mono product, which is petroleum. We're not able to get the best prices for it, which means that we're not able to get our forex in, which means that we've had to do a lot. The government has, in their very few short time, have had to take decisions that previous governments have not been able to take. So, yes, while we can give them big ups or we can give them props for taking those decisions as quickly as they have, the reality, which is what I tell most Nigerians, is that they couldn't have shied away from it. If they chose to, they didn't really have too many options than to implement those things. So, yes, they've done the first few things, or they've tried to start off first few things. Let's see they stay the course. Let's see what else they have in their bag. Already they're having to do with the unions. They're having to support an economy that is still flailing under the removal of subsidy, where costs have increased. There's the talk of power tariffs, electricity tariffs also increasing. And interesting thing about Nigeria is that you have those two things. When those two things are going up, when the prices of fuel moves up, also and your electricity tariffs move up, there are things that work hand in hand in Nigeria, because a lot of the guys, a lot of the bottom bottom of the population, a lot, because of the lack of infrastructure, electrical infrastructure, a lot of the bottom line in Nigeria actually make use of petroleum as they are to fuel their generators, their small generation sets, to be able to power their small businesses, to be able to power their homes at night. Now the cost of those things have increased. And on the other hand, now tariffs are going to go up. And tariffs have had to go up. The plans to increase tariffs have been there for years. So you have those burdening things. Now you also have Forex, and the Nigerians are going to be pulled on several stands.
So many different things going on at the same time.
Different directions, but Nigeria is an interesting country because, despite all the suffering and despite all the complaints, people are buying those big cows for this week. So let's hope that the government actually does, let's see, we need to see the proof. It needs to show working at the end of the day. It's good that Dr. Akinwumi is saying that, yeah, there's great plans, and I don't put it behind the president. I don't put it past the president to be able to roll out those great plans and what he wants to do and what he's been saying that for years, and now he's in the position to say it and do it. But what we're interested in the doing. So yes, everything else, but Nigerians want to see the doing. I want to be able to feel the impact of what is done, and there's a lot to be done. So I'll say that yes, at the same conference there were a lot of talk about how to wrap up funding to be able to fund and support the governments. But what Nigerians are interested in is how these economic plans come on ground and what difference it makes in their lives.
All right, it's one thing to to do the talking, but of course you have to walk the walk as well. Let me go to WhatsApp really quickly before we go to our next story here. Dami from Ikeja says the problem isn't the collection of identity. One, are the banks going to step up their anti-fraud safeguards? And two, can we trust the law enforcement agencies not to abuse the data collected? Remember the student who was arrested because of posts about the former first lady. All right, let me take another one here. Cisco Delgado says, the fact is that NIN, okay, good morning, Mr. C. NIN is tagged or linked to all mobile telephone numbers of individuals. The fact is that NIN is designed to encompass all this information of every Nigerian. That is enough. Let me take one more here. Victor Show says, which social media handles are they actually requesting for? Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, and so on. Well, it's going to be, well, we'll see. We'll see when the form.
Good question, because there are no standards for social media, really.
Yeah, because it's a very broad spectrum, if I can actually put it that way. All right, let's move on to our next.
my own social media platform and give them.
All right, Mr. C, let's move on. And this is coming from the Daily Trust, where the acting Inspector General of Police, Mr. Olukayode Egbetokun, has said the Nigeria Police will establish a quick intervention squad to tackle the menace of crimes and criminality.
Okay, so thank you. So the acting Inspector General of Police has expressed his determination to ensure that policing is not only increased, but it's also improved dramatically. And he's proposed the establishment of a quick intervention force, which will be composed of carefully selected members of the Nigerian Mobile Police Force who have been trained for crisis de-escalation and strategies. Now, that is all. It's very good on paper, and we welcome that. However, we must also know our history to know why we got here. There have been existing units before now, but those units have run into problems. We remember SARS, which led to the 2020 protests, the NSAS protests. Now, SARS was a special unit within the Nigeria Police Force that was specially trained to deal with crime and crisis de-escalation. But we then saw how rogue elements within this SARS setup continually and persistently violated the fundamental human rights of Nigerians, and in some very sad cases, unlawfully and illegally terminated the lives of these Nigerians. So this is a good move in principle. However, beyond establishing this quick intervention force, the acting IGP also has to ensure that there is a structure already in place predating the establishment of this QIF to ensure that they follow laid down standard operating procedures, and that where there's any breach of external rules and regulations or the law, that the procedure is robust, the framework is robust enough to not only identify the culprits, or where a prima facie case has been established against them to ensure that they're prosecuted. Also, it's incumbent upon him, if he wants to go down in the annals of history as having done the right thing, to ensure that this quick intervention force does not go the way of the other units before it, like SARS, the anti-cult, anti-kidnapping, which are regularly associated and identified with breaches of the law, breaches of fundamental human rights, and illegal operations.
Exactly one thing I want to highlight here. I mean, we have all these other what I'm looking for here, these other sections or sectors within the police force already. And now acting IG is talking about creating a quick intervention force. I mean, shouldn't the focus be on dealing with the already established other quote unquote factions or sectors within the police force? Units, thank you very much. Units is the right word I was looking for. Units that are already existing right now, as opposed to creating another one, bearing in mind the issues already with the current units.
Okay, so there are two possible perspectives, or two possible ways to look at it. One is the perspective which you raised, that we should first sort out the other units and make sure that they're properly established, properly running. But in the interim, while that is going on, you have this problem that also needs to be dealt with. So I want to believe that he's dealing with two concurrently. So he's setting up a force to deal with this particular problem while he's also resetting and reforming the other units. And again, a key requirement is the level of funding he will get for the Nigeria Police Force. Because all of these things, whether you're reforming the units, whether you're establishing a new unit, whether you need to train them, whether you need to equip them, it requires funding. And if the funding is inadequate, then it will hamper whatever it is that you're trying to achieve. Now, if we do not want this force to illegally obtain or demand money or extort money from Nigerians, they have to be properly funded, they have to be properly paid, and they have to be properly monitored and disciplined. Will all of that be in place? Time will tell.
Time will tell. All right, Chibuzor, let's take a story here from the Punch newspaper. Now, the Enyosa Resettlement Committee of Lagos State has lamented the continued encroachment on their land by suspected land grabbers. Now, the committee alleged that a realtor identified simply as Murphy recently invaded the expanse of land lying at Enyosa Ekpe Expressway, Ekpe, with thugs and policemen from the Lagos State Environment and Special Offenses Enforcement Unit, otherwise known as the task force.
Okay, so this is one of the interestingly, this also brings there's an aspect of this that also contains involves the police and the use or misuse of the police in this instance. So basically, what we have is a community that used to be somewhere around the Lekki Free Trade Zone, which was relocated as part of the acquisition of their communal land or communal property for project on the Lekki Free Trade Zone, and they were moved to the location called Enyosa, expanse of land at Enyosa around the Ekpe Expressway. So there's what we have is an instance where a realtor, or as we popularly call them, a developer, simply known as Murphy, invaded the expanse of land, along with thugs and policemen from the task force to take over the land. Now, the committee, apparently they've had issues with it, and they had set up a resettlement committee. And one of the roles or the jobs of the committee was to approve any purchase of lands around that area. So the committee had basically our rules of engagement was anybody who had gotten any property allocated from that period had to come to them to get proper receipts. And they have been tackling various land grabbers and things. So, but this is not to cut down. No, let's cut down from the story and look at the culture of the story. What is happening in this instance is not anything different. Here we've seen that they've engaged sometime I think 2 weeks ago, 10 days ago, obviously, that's on the 16th of June, they had a meeting with the Lagos Commissioner of Police, who had all job parties to maintain peace. It was after that meeting that Mr. Murphy decided to take the power into his own hands, got police officers and some the supposedly police officers, in this instance, and thugs, and had decided to take it by force. So what we have is the committee and the committee in charge of the resettlement in that area who are calling foul and saying, hey, this guy is a land grabber. Now, while this is going to be resolved, and typically this kind of issues get resolved either by negotiation, discussions, or whoever has the most power. We'll see how it plays out. We hopefully will be able to track how it plays out in the long run. This happens almost on a daily basis within Lagos State, and minus Lagos State, I suspect it probably happens across the country. Our real estate, obviously, is in Nigeria. We have very few rules that govern real estate, and real estate is seen as the major form of investment. And especially in places like Lagos, where there is land is limited in structure and limited in availability, people are taking over land that previously belonged to communities. People have to ask for land. And unfortunately, the entire process of acquiring land is not as clear as it ought to be. And I'll tell you from recent experience, you want to get a property in Lagos, especially land that is sitting down somewhere you previously would have. Obviously, you have to do the entire thing yourself. Somebody comes with whatever documentation, you send somebody down to allow us to help you check the level of the documentation. The ease of having to do that process in itself is a bit challenging. It's not
it's a tedious process.
Now, I think earlier in the year or towards the end of last year, you had the Office of the Surveyor General getting burnt down. So there's a bit of that has now thrown in some spanners into, the surveyor's office got burned down. So some spanners have been thrown into the works. Which actually has delayed that process a bit further. But that's by the side. What we tend to have, and why I'm a bit worried about the police involvement, is we don't know if Mr. Murphy is in the right stand or not, but we continuously see the use of the police by anybody who can pay for it. And unfortunately, we're still seeing it today, where anyone who can pay for it is able to get the police to be able to do whatever they need to do, right? We don't know if this were genuine policemen in this instance. Let me give them the benefit of the doubt, or we don't know if Mr. Murphy, who is the developer or realtor, is in the right. But I would like to see where the police actually sticks to their fundamental duties, acts within the remit of the law, because like Mr. T has mentioned previously, one of our challenges with dealing with the police and anything that has to do with government here is that deficit of trust. While the police and the government agencies should actually work on behalf of the citizens of Nigeria, our challenge has always been that they do not seem to understand that remit, and they seem to work counter to the citizens of Nigeria, and they seem to work counter to the laws or any legal framework. So it's one of those things that we're wary of, but this is not anything different from what happens on a daily basis in Lagos, and let's see how it plays out.
All right, let's see how this one plays out. Let me take a few messages really quickly before we have to call it a day on Freshly Pressed. This is from Ajay. Ajay says, good morning. African Development Bank is an affiliate of IMF and World Bank. So Dr. Adesina is in support of the new government's implementation of policies as advocated by these institutions, which from the experience of some other developing countries could lead to further decline in the standard of living of Nigerians. Victor Sheo says Lagos and Lagos Indigen should come to the realization that Lagos has attained a cosmopolitan and metropolitan city like Johannesburg, Cairo, Dubai, and so on and so on. Property ownership in the claims are no longer local and indigenous. Let's grow beyond this village mentality of grabbing land and other nefarious activities around land ownership. Ike said, these policies will end up reducing consumer spending, adversely impact GDP, and increase the Gini coefficient. I'm not sure if I got that right in Nigeria. Let me take one more really quickly. Linda says the CBN and bank should sit up to their responsibility and be competent and efficient with the NIN, BVN, and other documents they've already mandated, rather than request more materials they will still not be efficient with eventually. I no longer have social media handles to share. All right, thank you for your message, Linda. And we have to call it a morning on Freshly Pressed. Thanks for all the messages, and I couldn't get through all of them, unfortunately, and apologies for that. Of course, time playing a very, very big part here. Thank you so much, Mr. C and Chibuzor, for joining me this morning.
Thanks so much. Bye.
All right, Lagos Freshly Pressed will make a return at 7:30 tomorrow. But meanwhile, so much more to look forward to this morning. At 8:15, we'll get right into the locker room and talk sports. And at 9 o'clock, Lagos, you are going to get talking. Stay with us and keep listening to Smooth 98.1.
Bye, Chibuzor.
Bye, Mr. C. Take care. Have a great day.